Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casmon, and I would like to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying this show and getting some great value for your investing goals, we would love to hear about it. Give us some honest feedback with a rating and review. It helps us, but it also helps other listeners find this show for their investing goals. We got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Eddie Speed. Now, Eddie Speed is renowned as one of the nation's top note educators with more than 40 years of experience. Now, he founded Note School, an esteemed training company that focuses on educating individuals about purchasing both performing and non-performing discounted mortgage notes. Let's welcome to the show, Eddie Speed.
How are you?
Eddie, I'm great. It's great to have you on. Hey, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Well, I started buying discounted performing notes in 1980 and primarily was focused on seller financing. I've bought, bank loans and other loans, but I bought 50,000 seller finance notes. So, I would certainly be known as the seller finance guy, right? And so as the market allows for it, there's institutional discounted notes that we would jump in and buy. And then all of a sudden the market will kind of disappear. And, so we bought non-performing notes, for example, in different cycles. We're waiting for what we think will be a pretty good cycle. It hasn't quite hit yet. So we're kind of, just trying to be patient. You don't ever want to be the first guy in, they say, right? And so, but the market is really, really good for seller financing. And that's really because of some conditions in the market. And I'm sure that's what we'll dive off into today. I will make a kind of a bold statement. The odds are pretty much way in the favor of it's way more profitable to seller finance or be in the note space right now than it is to own a rent house. And so
I love it.
That's either provable with math or it's not provable,
Yeah. Eddie, we're definitely going to talk about that, right? Comparing note investing to buying single family rentals or even just rentals in general. But I want to go back to what you said, right? One, you've been in this industry a long time, started back in 1980. So you got 45 years of experience in this space. You understand different market cycles. You mentioned you've done over 50,000 seller finance note deals. I think that's a lot of experience. And certainly you understand a thing or two about how to navigate this space. Before we go too far, some of our listeners may not be familiar with note investing. Just set the table for us. What exactly is note investing? And I mentioned in your bio that you focus on both performing and non-performing. Just set the table with what those terms mean.
Okay. Well, everybody on the podcast presumably has bought a house. And if you got a mortgage, you got a Fannie Mae mortgage lender made you a loan. They made it to a guideline that Fannie Mae gave them. Fannie Mae didn't actually make you a loan. Mortgage company made you a loan, but to Fannie Mae's specifications. And then they sold that loan to Fannie Mae, right? Or they sold that loan and then it went into a mortgage-backed security. So the mortgage company made you a loan, but they didn't keep the loan. They made you a $200,000 loan, but they sold it in the marketplace. And a note is saleable just like any other asset. So what I did was I perfected a technique a long time ago. I started with a company you probably have heard of called Homevestors, right? The ugly house guys. And so I was their note guy, not an employee. I was in the note business, but I set up a note system where their franchisees could follow a recipe, an underwriting box. This is the minimum standard credit. This is a minimum standard income. This is the minimum standard down payment, blah, blah, blah. And I gave all these variables to them, just like a traditional lender would give, a customer and say, this, we make loans under this criteria. So when I did that, and I said, you write loans to this documentation in this way, then I made seller financing just an individual selling their property and carrying the paper for the buyer, carrying the financing. I made it like a mortgage banker, not like homemade seller financing, how most people do it, right? So when I did that, then I could box up hundreds of loans or thousands of these loans And I could go to the secondary market with them and I could sell these loans to insurance companies and finance companies and banks and hedge funds because it was written where, even though it was a seller finance note, it was written to a very specified underwriting guideline. In other words, I just built professionalism around seller financing. And so that's how I did 50,000 notes. Yes, I bought legacy notes. You can call me this afternoon. Hey, Eddie, do you guys buy notes on so and so? I've got a note that I've had for 4 years now. I want to sell it. Yeah, I mean, sure, we still buy those. But I could have never done 50,000 if I'd have done it like that. I did 50,000 because I work with real estate investors and show them how to make better notes.
Eddie, I appreciate you sharing that. With that experience, work with home investors, having more of a professional approach to bring this to the marketplace, that allowed you to scale. I think for some folks, when we talk about seller financing, notes, there may still be a little bit of a disconnect. Can you talk, like, are you going to these homeowners and they are like providing that financing themselves, or maybe just, I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the seller
So
financing
most
component.
most of my customers today are professional real estate investors, right? They buy and sell property for a living, or they have a rental portfolio, right? I help professional real estate investors. I don't necessarily deal with mom and pop that have one note on one property. I deal with people that create, 10 notes or 100 notes, right? And I work with them in buying their notes. And I'm known as a guy in that world. Like, I'm in probably 3 or 4 of the top biggest real estate masterminds out there for the house buyer types, right? Collective Genius, Boardroom, Investor Fuel. And so when I walk in that door, that's Eddie the note guy. That's how that would be what I would be known as. And so I do business to business. In other words, I'm dealing with a real estate investor that would create notes, and I'm always trying to help him make better notes. And that way he can sell the note and not get clobbered in the discount. Because what happens is if you don't make a note to a certain specification, and you don't accidentally figure this out, is what I've discovered, right? Then all of a sudden, when you come to meet somebody like me that deals in the secondary market, that deals in buying those kind of notes, then I'm going to say, well, your note's discounted more heavily because of whatever, blah, 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 whatever that is. And they're like, oh, well, I didn't know that. Well, you've already cooked the pie. Now we can't fix it, right? And that's the problem. That's the industry thing. And so I saw this as a problem a long time ago, and I've tried to be on the offense to do it. So I helped a lot. I started with home investors, but I've helped thousands, but let's just say, of real estate investors with a recipe of how to create seller financing so that they can go out in the marketplace and create these notes, because the banks are really tough right now. Underwriting for banks is terrible. The underwriting standard in mortgage banking is called the Mortgage Credit Availability Index. It's an index put out by mortgage bankers. Before the virus, before February of 2020, the index was about 185. Today it's at 94.
Hmm.
That's how tight credit is. So you guys in the multifamily space, you're like, oh man, it's really hard to get a loan right now and stuff. Well, let me tell you something. The residential market's been that way since the beginning of the virus. That's one of the reasons that loan production is down 70%. We all credit it to, well, the high rates. Right? Everything's blown up because of high rates. Well, let me just tell you this. Mortgage credit tightening was happening before rates increased, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah, and you
So,
just gave some great stuff there, man. You talked about just the overall market, understanding that credit tightening is that, or it has limited or reduced the amount of loans by 70%. But then also, as you're, explaining a little bit more, you really help those folks who have notes, who are creating notes, but they're not necessarily doing it to optimize their returns on that investment.
right.
Let's back up, right? Because some of our folks, you know, may not understand how to get a note or how to create notes. So I want to take them through the journey of what does that path look like to create a note, and then I want to come back to how you're helping individuals make sure they're maximizing those notes in the first place. So again, if I wanted to get into this space, right, and let's just say to your point, hey, multifamily is hard to find, or rentals are hard to find. Maybe I could just become a note investor. What does that path look like?
Well, quite honestly, I have learned that that's the biggest tool that my school can do. I have a school called Note School, and we help people to go do the business. You're not going to have access to notes like I have access to notes. You're just not, right? I mean, you don't of the top 500 house buyers, I would say 90% of them would know Eddie Speed's name, right? So we got a seat at the table, and we've built a system around that so that when we train people to go do the business and they go down the road with us, we go help them find inventory of notes for two reasons: access to knowing where the notes are. And then another important factor is helping them evaluate it, right? Because we've looked at hundreds of thousands of notes, we have some sense of what is the likelihood this loan will be as good as you hoped it was. And so we built a school around showing people investing in notes, but we also embrace the idea of done for you, helping them get in the business. Because otherwise, it's the mistake factor, or just you, as you said when we before we started the podcast, your audience wants their time back. And so we tried to figure out a way to help them get their time back. So we work with real estate investors and try to help them make the best notes. And then I built a liquidation system. I partner with some family offices. I partner with some insurance companies. I have banks. I have a whole laundry list of people that have an appetite for notes of different quality, size, different scenarios. And so that's what I do. And of course, we have our own little family office here, and we buy and hold notes ourselves. But we find more notes than one capital source can fund. And so for that reason, and then we help our students be in the business. And of course, I guess the question is, somebody goes like, well, Eddie, notes sound pretty good. I got a first mortgage on somebody's house. Why is that better than a rent house? So let's do a quick little comparison. In Dallas, Texas, $250,000 rent house rents for $1,800 a month. Now, what happened during the virus is rents went up. Now they've settled back down, and they're about 20% higher than they were. Rents rose by 20%, but expenses rose by 60%. So you see, you have a rent house that's cash flowing way less money than it was in 2019. Even though inflation and everything costs more, that's just the math. So now all of a sudden you take that house that costs $250,000, but yet it rents for $1,800 a month. You're not going to net any more than $900. You can ask any seasoned landlord in the country, 50% is going to be your number, meaning that $250,000 gets you $900 a month. If I took $250,000 all of last year, a student that bought notes from us for $250,000 deployed gets $2,700 a month in income average. Well, you got 900 versus 2,700. That's 3x. And by the way, that's just normal. I mean, that's not some wild story that I could tell on one property in one crazy situation. We see people converting their rent houses to seller financing and getting about 2.5 times the income, netting 2.5 times the income they could on the same rent house. So they had a rent house, and they were getting $1,000 a month, and now they owner finance it and they're getting $2,500 a month. You say, Eddie, that's crazy. No, it's true. Because people's mortgage payment are more than their rent today. You agree with that? Like most everybody, like a renter for the same house is paying $2,000. Somebody gets a mortgage, they're paying $2,500. Okay, well, what if I said, well, that sounds like a good day to be the bank?
Yeah,
So,
Eddie, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
so that's kind of that's a market phenomena that's happened. And when I pointed out to people like your audience or you're like, oh my God, I can see that. But we don't walk around consciously thinking about it until somebody kind of points us in that direction, seemingly.
Yeah, Eddie, I think this is one of those things too with your experience, right? you've seen different market cycles. And to your point, there was a time where you could get crazy high rents above where that mortgage would be. And obviously there's leverage with the loan. So in some scenarios, hey, it definitely makes sense to own the property as a rental. You get all the benefits of owning the real estate. But kind of what you're also getting at is some investors, especially when you're building out your portfolio, you may want to be passive. Maybe you don't want to deal with, the tenants and the different challenges that come with it. And if you can get to the place where economically it makes sense to own the note and just invest passively in the note itself, that may be a good strategy. Can you talk about maybe what you pay attention to in the economy? I know obviously all real estate is local, but as you talked about that example in Dallas, like what are you looking for to say, hey, you know what? This is a ripe opportunity for us to acquire even more notes than we typically would.
I think our students told us the answer. Our students show up at note school and they're frustrated landlords. They've got rent houses and they're frustrated. They're getting a whipping dealing with them, but they're not making money with them. And so at some point we'd kind of be pretty dumb if we didn't stop and go like, oh, what's their problem? So we started running case studies on their rentals. And we're like, oh crap, they're not making money. And it doesn't matter how seasoned they are. I have students that come to note school have 500 rentals. I have students that come to note school have 5 rentals. They're all it's like the more sophisticated guys used to have a tremendous advantage over the unsophisticated guys. But now, because of inflation, see, when inflation started happening, people thought rental properties were going to be the ultimate fix against inflation. I didn't believe it then. I sure don't believe it now. But I didn't believe it then because people kept saying, "Oh, rents just rise where," and like, well, yeah, rents rise until they're not affordable, and then all of a sudden you have to adjust to the market, right? In other words, there's a ceiling on what you can charge, but there wasn't a ceiling on expenses. That's the problem. And so people started looking at this, and it became a phenomenon. I looked at it and said this conversation first started literally 2 years ago. John Burns, who I'm sure you know who he is, John Burns wrote an article in the summer of 2023, and he said people's on a starter home, people's mortgage payment are $1,000 more than their rent on the same house. Then Bigger Pockets writes an article, and I'm thinking, well, hell, they've been watching my podcast. I've been saying this. Nobody's like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, they have pretty cool. They've been watching my podcast because I've been laying this out for a while. Kind of joking, of course. And the point is now all of a sudden, what I like, if these big masterminds I'm at now, like I get on the main stage at one of these masterminds, I'm saying, are you getting the juice out of your lemon on your rentals? And if you aren't, why don't you consider seller financing them? And then I show them how to liquidate their note or part of their note or a piece of the cash flow. You can use leverage strategies with notes just like you can with rental properties. People just don't know how to do it because it's not what they've done. You don't think I bought 50,000 notes out of my personal checking account, do you? I mean, you use capital stack techniques just like owning multifamily. And so, but that's what I help people with. Like I'm not more seasoned than them. I'm just more specialized than them.
I love that, Eddie. You talked about just the different ways of using a capital stack, understanding exactly where the opportunities lie, and how this really over the last couple of years has become a bigger opportunity. When you talk about what would someone pay, let's just use a ranch style starter home, to rent that home versus to buy that home, they're going to be spending $1,000 more a month in their monthly payments. So that's when it's a really good indication that, hey, it might be better to own the note as opposed to owning the real estate, because those expenses, as many people are seeing with insurance going up, taxes going up, the cost of labor in general going up, the difficulty of finding good labor, and then the ease of management being more of a challenge. Those are all factors you've got to consider, right? And it's one of the reasons we do what we do in the syndication space is provide a passive investment opportunity. But note investing is another strategy that you can utilize. And the market is really, really ripe for those opportunities today for those investors. I know you started to allude to, the different strategies of leveraging capital, and many of our listeners are syndicators who are used to raising capital or working with investors, but
Yep.
some folks are just trying to start off. So can you just talk to us about, like, hey, what's necessary to get going? Like, if I only have a little bit of money, can I start in this space? Do I need a minimum 50,000, 100,000? Like, talk to us about kind of the range of what it
You're
takes to actually get
you're going to
started.
need some investable capital, and unless you have a rich uncle, right? If you've got some kind of money source that you can go be the boots on the ground and they can bankroll it, that's your source of capital. It may not be in your personal checking account, but you've got capital. You have investable capital available to you, right? But you can't go get in the business with nothing. I'm not the guru that says you can be broke and homeless and you'll be a million. Like, I'm not that guy, right? So I track people that have investable capital. Usually they're decent net worth. High net worth is somewhat,
Subjective.
not necessarily,
Subjective.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they usually have high income.
Mhm.
I train business owners, doctors, high end realtors, engineers. Like, I train people like that, and retirees. And the thing that people first like about notes, forget the money for a moment, less stress. I tell people you can own 1,000 notes or 55 rentals, same work.
I love
And
it. Yeah.
and that is an absolute that is an absolute scenario that really people, when they see that, they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Are there is there kind of a, I don't say a minimum, but is there a figure that people should expect? Like, if I've got 5,000, is that enough to get started, or do I need 50, 100? Like, what's kind
You're,
of
you're
the
going to need 50 grand. You're going
okay.
to have access to 50
Yeah.
grand.
And because what you're talking about is you're
I
not
mean, you
buying
couldn't go
one
do
note.
multifamily with 5 grand, could you?
Right. No, not at all. Not at all. But
Yeah.
what you're talking about is not buying one note, right? We're talking about being able to.
You wouldn't, there's no need to go to a school to learn to go do one deal. But what most people don't know is you can build a rinse and repeat out of it. I train a lot of people that came from the multifamily world.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think it's any gigantic secret. That industry has a dent in it, right? There's an issue, right? The values have dropped. People are not sure where the values are going to go. Financing's gotten really tough, and we got to see how all this refi and these balloons work out, right? So it's so, but so people have come to me because they are a syndicator and they have learned how to raise money. They're just riding a different horse right now, right? They're the same jockey. They're just riding a different horse. And so that's that. I think it's smart for people to do it and look at it in that way. And then also, people that I say nobody's going to put all their money in one asset or probably even in one asset class. I'm probably a weirdo that most of my money is tied up in notes, but I've been doing it 45 years and I'm diversified in the notes I'm
Yeah.
invested in. But I also own real estate. So it's like I'm not anti owning property versus notes. It's just at the moment the economics are so in my favor. I'm going to go back to a saying, and we've circled around this. I just wanted the audience to leave here with this clarity. When people's mortgage payment is way more than you can net being a landlord, that's the day you stop and say, maybe it's time to be the bank. And that's a market fact.
I like that,
Here's a
Eddie.
challenge. Here's a challenge for you. Go take your rent house portfolio. Go take your portfolio of rent houses and go run current fair market value on all your rentals. Don't be high, don't be low. Just call the ball what it is, whatever they're worth. Then go take the net operating income, and I mean real net. Don't do it month to month. Take it over the last 3 years and figure out your NOI, and then just figure your cap rate. If it's $200,000 value and you're netting $8,000 a year, guess what? You're making a 4 cap. Is that good? Is that what you wanted? Because You could sell or finance the same house and at least be earning a 9. You see what
Yeah,
I'm
Eddie,
saying?
absolutely. That's a good way to think about it. And again, you just got to evaluate your strategies. I think too often people just do one thing, and we're all y'all want to focus, which is great to get some progress and success. So you don't want to have the shiny object syndrome. However, on the same note, it is important to pay attention to what's going on in the market, the economy, and what other strategies may help you get there. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit more on that. For folks who are newer and beginning, can you maybe talk about different strategies to leverage note investing to diversify the real estate portfolios?
A note is an asset. A performing note has cash flow. You can sell that cash flow. You can sell part of that cash flow. You can sell 100% of the payment for a term. You could have a 20-year note and sell 10 years. You could have a 20-year note and you could sell 70% of the payment. There's all kind of ways that we have perfected how people can go recapitalize their business, right? Otherwise, you would run out of money. You couldn't go do 20 note deals because you'd run out of the capital to buy 20 notes. So we show you how to go buy a note, recapitalize part of it, and then all of a sudden you're building your own little bank. And it's not but syndicators completely understand this because that's essentially what they do. They use the bank's money. This is hypothetical. They use the bank's money for 80% of the cost, and they use an investor's money for 20% of the cost, right? That's a capital stack, we call it, right? It's the same thing. And you can do all this can be done with notes. And that's how people say, well, I wonder how in the world he did so much volume, because I started really perfecting and understanding how to recapitalize my portfolio. And when you do that, then all of a sudden the mystery kind of goes away, right?
Yeah, I love it. Eddie, you mentioned earlier that you have a masterclass available for folks who really want to dig in and learn more. They can go to noteschool.com/multifamily and access some of the free resources you have available there because I think it's really interesting. It's a great space that is a great complement to multifamily investing and trying to scale up that rental portfolio, but doing so by owning some of the notes as well. One of the things that I know some of my peers have speculated is that due to rising interest rates and bridge debt that's been out there, there may be an opportunity to acquire more notes in the multifamily sector. Can you just maybe talk a little bit more about that? Not necessarily asking for a prediction, but what does that either process look like, or how realistic is that opportunity looking to be?
It's going to happen. It happens in every cycle. The whole commercial real estate cycle, is definitely going to cause a lot of troubled loans to get sold at discounts. It is early in the game, and we're watching it very closely. I've played this game out many times in various cycles in the past. I'm pretty connected with people in that space. We just aren't seeing some massive amount of deeply discounted multifamily loans coming on the market at the moment, right? Usually the first thing that happens is the lenders kind of get in trouble and the accountants make them charge down the loans that are on their books. They have $1 million loan on the books. So, hey, well, that's not worth $1 million anymore. We're going to make you write that loan down. They still owe $1 million, but we're going to make you write it down. And because normally the write down has to happen before you can come in and buy the loan at a deep discount. In other words, the lender's not going to go sell you $1 million loan for 600 grand and take a $400,000 hit on their books the day they sell it to you. That is completely, totally unrealistic. They have already charged that loan down before they sell it. And so these charge downs are in motion. And so people say, why is it taking as long as it is? Because multifamily has had a slippage in values. And so people are saying, why is that true? Why is that happening and stuff? And it's really because the accounting has to get there first before the the availability of discounted mortgage assets are going to be really available. And I know that because I've lived through, probably 6 cycles in the past. and it's happened every time. And so that's kind of where we are. But it will happen for sure. And we will have our head up and looking hard. And when it starts happening, and when we think it's a value buy, we'll chase that asset class.
I love it. Hey, Eddie, thank you for sharing that. Again, if you want to learn more, go to noteschool.com/multifamily. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Right. Eddie, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Accounting. Biggest mistakes I ever made in the business weren't buying bad notes. It was that I wasn't as squared away in accounting as I need to be. And I try to make a high focus on really knowing where I'm at in the books and making sure that we have a level of awareness today so that we don't get surprised.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I have anything super fancy in that regard. I mean, we use everything from AI to, all the softwares and technologies and stuff. But, I think we're fairly normal in our shop. I mean, is there some magic software that we use? Quite honestly, Excel still is the most amazing tool I've ever seen, quite honestly. It's astonishing that they built it, that you can use it for so many applications and running modeling and math and whatever. Our industry's small world enough that it's not like some special software. Oh, go buy so-and-so. It's not really, most things we have to kind of build it once we have the framework of it. So I hate to give you a dud on that, but I don't know that I can think of something that's what I think is really amazing.
Oh, good. Give me the book you recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Never Split the Difference.
Excellent book. Love that one. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
I get up every morning. I spend about 20 minutes before I get busy. And I just spend about 20 minutes kind of focused in on what's going to happen today. And I try to stay very focused on being what I am for my company, which is the visionary. I figure out some of these things because I stop and think about it, right? If I get so busy doing something and I don't stop and think about like the cause of it, then all of a sudden I miss the opportunity. So I just think you just got to stop and, get the clutter out of your mind and have a time that you focus every day. And when I first get up seems to be fairly good for me.
Give me your number one insight for getting started in note investing.
I don't think you're going to do it well without some training. I hope you'd consider Note School to be that, but you got to learn something. Otherwise the learning curve is too painful. So that's what we think Note School is, just a compression of time.
I love it. Great advice there. And I love the way you approach that. Let's go in a different direction. You are in Fort Worth. And by the way, I mentioned Dallas earlier. You were very quick to clarify that you are not from Dallas, but you're from Fort Worth. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Joe T. Garcia's. It's the most famous Mexican place in Fort Worth. If you've never been there, just get ready to stand in line. It's quite a popular place, but it's an experience. You ought to try it.
I love it. Joe T. Garcia's it is. Hey, you gave me a lot of great insights and a lot of great insights for our listeners. One, just understanding note investing, one, as we think about it, owning the paper on the property instead of the rental itself, that could be advantageous, particularly in the current environment where the cost of rent is just high. Expenses have shot up. So that profit margin is not what it was even, 3 or 4 years ago. So it may be something to consider as either an alternative strategy or a complementary strategy to investing in multifamily or into rentals. The other thing you got and you started talking about was just being able to scale. Not to get into this to buy one, but how do you create another business out of this? How can you do the capital stack, raise money potentially, but really understand how to make this a profitable business for your investing goals? For folks who want to learn more, they can check out the free resources you have on your website at noteschool.com/multifamily. And Eddie, I just want to thank you again for being a great guest coming on Multifamily Insights. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. Have a great day.